Many visitors come to our antiques roadshows, not just for a valuation of their family treasures. They come in search of their past.
I would really like somebody out there to be able to tell me exactly what the act of heroism was.
I know no more, I'm afraid, but apart from the fact that this has been in the family now for many, many years.
And at least at this opportunity, I would like to say thank you, wherever he is.
Our visitors want to look back down the generations and unlock their secrets. In this series, our roadshow experts turn sleuths. We're on the hunt for clues that will finally piece together a hidden family history. Welcome to Antiques Roadshow Detectives. Tonight, our investigations are into two women who spent their young working lives in service. A century ago, there were 1.5 million servants in the country. Their lives were usually little documented. Those that were are often locked away in private family archives. Roadshow expert Andy McConnell tries to find out more about the life of a former domestic servant.
So at one point she's out in some godforsaken laundry with boiling water, and the next time we see her, she's laying silver onto the table.
She would be very happy to be out of the laundry.
You bet!
But first, we're looking at the life of Mary Murray Weir. Born in 1899, she worked as a housemaid on a number of Scottish estates. We first heard about her from her niece Liz Wilson at a roadshow in York. Expert Judith Miller couldn't help but be moved by the details of her difficult life in service.
Well, my aunt, she fell in love with the chauffeur in the house.
Oh.
Yes. And eventually she was having a baby with him. But he was married.
Oh, no. No.
So she had to leave, and the quilt and the tea cosy was given to her as a leaving present. So she was put in the home for unmarried mothers. She had the baby, it was adopted, and she then decided, I think because it was such a disgrace in those days, that she'd go to Australia. And she left the tea cosy and the quilt with my mother in case she ever came back.
Well, you know, we're looking at a time in the past where obviously
Yes.
that was a terrible disgrace.
It was.
And this type of Victoriana really doesn't sell for much. It would probably make not any more than £80.
Oh my goodness.
But what a story.
When Liz came to see me at York Roadshow, I was much more fascinated by the backstory. What happened to Mary Murray Weir? What was her life like? What happened to her when she got to Australia? And of course, what happened to that baby? Did she end up in a poor house? Was she adopted? That's what fascinates me.
To find out more about Mary Murray Weir's life, Judith has invited Liz to Scotland. Back to the city of Glasgow, where she grew up and where she first heard about her Aunt Mary's story.
My mother, when she was much older, she just sat down one day and she said, you know, Mary had a baby and it was adopted. Well, we were all absolutely amazed. We couldn't believe it. None of the family seemed to know about it at all. It was never mentioned, ever. When I speak to cousins, they often wondered, why did Mary go to Australia? Mary was working in Edinburgh and had fallen in love with the chauffeur there. And then the next thing that happened, she was pregnant. But the chauffeur was married, and she'd come to my mother and said, please, will you help me? So she took her to the minister at St. Rollock's Church, and the minister then put her into a home for unmarried mothers, and eventually the baby was adopted.
The shame for Mary and her family would be too much to bear.
It would be a huge thing for Mary to have to come and tell my mother. You know, in this day and age, you know, and then it would be awful for the both of them. My grandfather, who hadn't a lot of money, actually gave Mary the money to go to Australia. Whether it was, the disgrace was too much for the family, I really don't know. I think she must have been absolutely devastated, leaving 4 very loving sisters and having to go to the end of the world.
After giving up her baby for adoption, Mary left Scotland and went to live in Queensland, Australia. She moved to the outback, married a rancher, and eventually had 3 more children.
After the Roadshow, I felt there'd be lots more we could learn, and I hope we'll be able to do that in the next few days.
Judith has invited Marion, the youngest of Mary's children, to join them in their quest. Liz is unaware that her cousin, who she hasn't seen for 20 years, has flown in from Australia.
So here we are. Obviously, I've got a little bit of a surprise for you, and somebody that could maybe join us on this quest for more information.
I wonder who that could be.
We'll have a look over there.
Ah, I don't believe it. Oh, Mommy. I can't believe it. Can you?
It's really good to see you. Yeah, it's a long time.
Oh, it is a long time. I cannot believe it. My wildest dreams.
You must be Marion.
I'm Marion.
Marion, I'm Judith.
Hello, Judith.
And I'm very much looking forward to us having a little adventure together.
Oh, it is an adventure, and oh, sorry. It's so emotional. I'm still in shock. My knees are shaking.
Mum had a great love for Scotland, very much so. She used to sing the songs, and you know, we always referred to Scotland as home. That's how we were brought up. You know, we just always said home. Yeah, very great love for Scotland. I didn't know that she'd had a baby that had been adopted. I didn't find that out until 1993. It was a complete surprise to me. A real tragedy as far as I'm concerned. I would have really liked to have met my sister. Yeah.
So we'd better get started.
Yes.
We've got a lot of information to find out about Mary.
Really looking forward to it.
That's wonderful.
Marion's mother, Mary Murray Weir, was born in Scotland on the 31st of July, 1899, in the small village of Dulsurf in Lanarkshire. Judith wants to take the cousins back to the place their mothers grew up and went to school. 100 years on, the children are still singing traditional ballads.
Step the gilly on we go, heel for heel and toe for toe, arm and row, all for Mary's wedding. Step the gilly on we go, heel for heel and toe for toe, arm and row, all for Mary's wedding.
I mean, that was amazing.
Oh, it was so emotional.
And we've got one more surprise in this school for you.
Really?
So come and have a look.
The school recently discovered an admissions register from the time Mary was a pupil.
If we look in here, you can see here, 16th to the 8th, 11th, Mary Weir.
Oh, goodness.
And she left in August of 1913.
Yeah, I know. I remember she left at that age, and really sort of resented the fact that she had to leave school.
Did she, Mum?
Yeah, very much so.
But it's amazing that this is
still here.
It's interesting to think that, you know, those were all her wee friends.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? You know, which was a special friend, one wonders.
Very moving.
I think you lost for words.
Yes, I am.
Oh, an emotional.
Yeah, very emotional.
Emotional, very emotional.
It was 1911 again.
Yeah.
And I was connected to...
The intervening years had just vanished.
Especially when we saw the register. And that just reminded me of how close they were and the letters that they'd sent.
She was never forgotten, never.
Many of the locals lived and worked on the Dulsurf estate for the laird. So when Mary left school at the age of 14, she followed in her parents' footsteps and went to work in Dulsurf House as a maid. The house is no longer standing, but one building that's been at the centre of village life for 300 years is the kirk. Reverend Cameron Macpherson has been at the church for over 30 years.
This is one of 3 galleries we have in Dulsurf Church, and the laird of Dulsurf with his family would be in this pew here, and the pews behind would have been for the household, the servants of Dulsurf House.
Your mum
would have sat in these pews when they came to church.
Yes.
And obviously the most important servants, the housekeeper, that would sit here.
I would think so, yes.
And then the less important would be further back.
Yes,
So I think your mum would have been a few pews back.
I think that's possible.
And it's interesting to think, you can just imagine her just walking in and sitting behind her laird.
Mary's life in service continued until she fell pregnant and was forced to turn to her sister, Liz's mother in Glasgow, for help. There was no National Health Service back in 1928. If you couldn't afford to pay for healthcare, you would be looked after in a poor law hospital like Stob Hill, where you'd receive free basic treatment. Judith has gone there with Marion and Liz. There's something she wants to show them.
So here we are at Stob Hill Hospital, where Mary had her baby. And here is the birth certificate
Oh, golly.
of Mary Bailey
Oh, Marion.
Weir.
Oh.
And what made me really emotional about this was that, you know, possibly the only thing she could give her was her name.
Oh.
So.
And that's Mum's signature.
It's heartbreaking, really.
It is.
Yep.
And I think it says a lot.
Yeah,
you know, it tells us a lot about the period.
Yep.
How must Mary have felt at this time, knowing that this was all she could do?
Unbelievable, isn't it? You're right.
It's really hard to put into words. Holding that birth certificate is the closest I've ever been to my sister. Yeah, that was very emotional.
Very emotional moment, isn't it, for you?
Yeah. She was a very compassionate person and a very generous person, and we had flats in a little seaside place called Yeppoon, and at one stage 3 unmarried mothers turned up. They were there for about 3 months, and she was so protective of them, and I really thought it was a bit odd at the time because he was this very conservative woman. In a way it seemed out of character. In retrospect I understand why. She took particular care of these 3 young girls.
Even though Mary was 29 years old, it was inevitable that she would have to give up her baby. The shame of being an unmarried mother and of going into a poor law hospital like Stob Hill was so great that to save embarrassment, birth certificates only recorded the hospital's address rather than its name. We know the baby was called Mary, but nothing is known about her adoption. It was mostly unregulated back then, which makes it more difficult for Judith to find out what happened to little Mary. She's brought Liz and Marion to Glasgow City Archives to talk to one person who can help them, Principal Archivist Dr. Irene O'Brien.
So Irene, we asked you to give us some help here about the baby that was put up for adoption, because obviously with a high level of illegitimacy in Glasgow at that time, and a lot of children put out to temporary adoption, we wanted to find out what happened to Mary.
We did check to see, we have the records of the poor law authorities who were responsible for children, and lo and behold did we not find details that it was an official adoption and it was not a private arrangement, which very often happened, and that's how people kept it quiet, isn't it? They did it among families and that, so people didn't know that that child had been illegitimate. So I've got the volume here and I'll let you have a look at that. I've hidden everyone else's so that you don't actually see that. On the 14th of August 1897, we've got Mary Weir telling she's a Protestant and that she's actually a domestic servant, and she's living in Dunnipace Estate in Lambert, and people actually put the advert in the newspapers that they wanted to adopt a child, and it tells you about somebody who wants parted to adopt baby girl, born 29/7/1928 at maternity, Mary Bailey Weir, and then what it does is give you the name of the adoptees.
That's about a fortnight after the birth, isn't it?
Almost exactly 2 weeks, the baby was gone.
I think it's amazing, these records, because so many times you don't get adoption records, do you, until they get formalised. I mean, it is an amazing piece of history.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So there's actually an advertisement. And who puts the advertisement in? The parent, the family.
You know, they wanted the thing dusted, finished, and then it was over for them, for the families. Obviously not for your mum.
And then in the 5th month of the next year, that was when she was on a boat to Australia.
You know, as a mother, I cannot imagine the pain and suffering that must go through someone to give away a child at 2 weeks old.
I think it's just been amazing and so, so emotional. I hadn't expected to find out all the things you've found out.
Looking at that record of the adoption, I couldn't take my eyes off that.
For it to be a newspaper advert.
Yeah.
It was so cold, wasn't it?
Quite a revelation.
Absolutely.
We'll return to Scotland to search for more information about Mary and her baby. And Judith has organised a long-awaited reunion.
We do have one more surprise.
I'm sure that will be an emotional occasion for everyone involved. Mary's story is the stuff of dramas like Upstairs, Downstairs or Downton Abbey. Thankfully for some, life was a little less tumultuous. Our next story is about a domestic servant called Phyllis Harpham. We first heard about her when a close friend of hers met Andy McConnell at a roadshow in Yorkshire, just a stone's throw from the big house where Phyllis worked in the 1920s.
It came from Captain Vernon Wentworth at Wentworth Castle, and a lady gave it to me who was in service to Captain Wentworth.
Yes. Well, we have his initial sealed onto the bottle, and this is one of the earliest bottles that leads today to the standard wine bottle. 1760. It's never been bettered. We told the story of the bottle on the show, but there was a twist to it, because behind the story, when she started explaining that this had been given to an old friend of hers, Phyllis, as a present from her master when she had been in service. And I'd really like to find out a bit more about that.
Andy's come to visit Patricia Firth, who he met at the roadshow, to see if she can tell him anything more about her friend Phyllis and her life in service.
Hi, nice to see you again. Thanks a lot. So, here's the bottle you brought in.
That's right, that's correct.
And what's going on here?
Well, actually, this is Phyllis, who gave me this bottle on her wedding day to George, and when they married, she had to leave the employ of Captain Wentworth.
So I'm interested by this whole concept of being in service. We've seen it on the telly, but it's so far from our lives today.
Yes.
So did she seem to enjoy herself? Is it a job she...
Oh, she was very proud to have been in service. Yes, she was in silver service to Captain Wentworth, and yes, I think she did enjoy her stay there.
So you've got that shot of her. Have you got
Yes.
any other pictures of her?
Yes, I've got some photographs of when she was an old lady, as I knew her.
Well, let's have a little look at as she became.
Yes.
Oh, there we are.
Yes, that's Phyllis with her sister in the back garden. Of course, she's an old lady there.
Well, she's got a cheeky smile in both of them.
Yes.
Was she a happy gal?
Oh, fabulous, yes. Very young at heart. We were great friends, as well as neighbours, we were great friends.
Wentworth Castle, where Phyllis worked, was built in 1731, and her employer, Captain Bruce Vernon Wentworth, was the last owner, selling it to Barnsley Council in 1948. Andy's come to meet volunteer guide Rita Harrison in the hope of tracing some of Phyllis's life through what records are left.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Andy. Hi.
So, as you know, I'm on the trail of Phyllis, and I gather that you've got some evidence of her life here.
Yes, we have. We've got one or two things we can show you. Phyllis worked here from about 1925 onwards.
Great. Well, let's go and find out, shall we?
Okay.
Wentworth Castle is now an adult education college. And although the inside has been transformed for teaching purposes, the library is a stunning reminder of the castle's former grandeur.
So here we have the proof that she worked here.
Yes, this ledger covers the wages from 1920 to 29. Here we are, Harpham P, wages, £13.12 and sixpence.
For the year?
For the year, yes.
Yeah, luxury.
Yes. It doesn't clearly state here what she does, but we do know from information later on that she worked in the laundry. And here we have her again, Harpham, wages.
What year?
This was 1929.
Yeah.
And £16, 1 and threepence. And this is a 4-year period.
So she's got £3 a year rise in that period.
Yes.
Well, that's really interesting because she talked about her time in civil service, never mentioning the laundry. Being in the laundry must have just been the worst job. I mean, awful, awful job. So I'm thinking that what we're seeing here is a career path, increased wages, different job. Does this fit in with life as it would have been at the house?
Yes, I believe so. As they prove their worth, they would be given a different status.
So at one point she's out in some godforsaken laundry with boiling water, and the next time we see her, she's laying silver onto the table. I mean,
Yes,
clearly
yes.
a superior job.
Oh, yes. She would be very happy to be out of the laundry.
You bet!
We do know that she was part of the entourage that went up to a place called Doll House. The house was on Rannoch Moor, which was another estate that they had, and they used to take staff with them.
They wouldn't have taken a laundry girl up, would they?
No.
No.
So she already had...
She's in the
moved
house
up
at
then.
this... Yes.
Yes.
The crucial part of it was that she met her future husband there.
Yes, she did.
So
Yes.
George was a gardener on the Scottish estate.
Yes. They met in 1929,
Okay.
and then they married in 1937.
So it's an 8-year courtship. Sweet. It's really quite human, isn't it?
Yes,
so
it
she's
is.
going up there and meets
Yes.
George,
Yes.
the gardener,
Yes, yes,
who she ends up spending the rest of her life with.
yes. Lovely story, yes. And this is the marriage certificate.
In 1937.
Yes, they married in 1937.
And this is the date that her master gives her the bottle that Patricia brings to the Roadshow.
What a wonderful gift. They could toast their marriage.
So here we start with a bottle and we end up with a story of a young girl from the village who enters service, scrubbing clothes when she started here, all for 40p a week. And yet she found redemption, didn't she? She did this work, she was well fed and cared for while she was here, but there was life beyond, and she found her guy and left her service and her master behind. Sounds pretty good, and I get the impression she'd be a pretty happy gal.
In Scotland, Judith Miller arranged for Liz to meet up with her Australian cousin Marion, who she hasn't seen for 20 years. Together they're on a quest to find out why Marion's mother gave up her baby for adoption and left Scotland to start a new life in Australia. The new information Marion and Liz have learnt about the birth and adoption of Mary's baby has filled in some of the missing parts of the story. We know that she went to live with a family in Fife. We can also reveal she grew up in Scotland, had her own family and lived until she was 71 years old. Her two daughters, Audrey and Gail, have since been in touch with Marion, their aunt. What she and Liz don't know is that Judith has arranged for them all to meet for the very first time.
We've made some very exciting discoveries, haven't we?
We definitely have.
And we've had a very emotional time, haven't we?
Been a roller coaster.
However, we do have one more surprise.
Gail and Audrey? Yeah. Goodness me, welcome. Oh, this is wonderful. Welcome to the family. Oh, lovely to meet you. It's just been one surprise after the other. It's been a roller coaster of surprises. This puts the icing on the cake completely.
So it's been very interesting over the last few days and very emotional. But what do you think your mum would think if she knew you were sitting here now?
Yeah, I think she'd be very happy. I think she'd feel very happy that we'd met.
We'd love to know from you a bit more about your mum.
She was a funny woman. She had a good sense of humour, a wicked sense of humour. That's the best thing about it. And some of the stories. Yeah. But she did. She had a good heart. There's a few photographs of Mum.
Oh.
There's one of her on a bike.
Oh, gosh.
As a young lady.
Isn't it great that we can see photos of her so young?
Yes.
That's my mum.
Oh,
my Aunt Vina.
Uh-huh.
And that's my gran.
Oh. She looks really good-natured.
She was, yeah.
Yeah.
How old would she have been in this one?
18.
And did she have any interest in finding out what
No,
had
because
happened?
obviously when I found out, She just said she'd had a happy life.
Right.
And she didn't want to delve into it. You know, she was quite happy. They'd been a good family, and they'd taken really good care of her.
She just said that my gran and my granddad had brought her up, and she looked on them as her mum and dad. And she said, after, obviously, I die, if you want to sort of find more about your roots, and go ahead and do it. So we just didn't ask any more questions, you know. Yeah.
Meeting Gail and Audrey for the first time, that's really important for me. That sense of family is something that has been missing from my day-to-day life, because I don't have it in Australia. I don't have family there.
I've enjoyed every minute of it, although it's been very emotional. It's brought history to life, the history of our family, and that's been really wonderful. And Judith, you know, has done so well in bringing it all together.
So, the thing that started everything.
It did indeed.
And this was your grandmother's quilt. And this started us on this voyage of discovery. We found far more evidence of your mum and your mum than I ever expected. So what this quilt has done has actually brought somebody from the other side of the world, somebody from the other side of the country, and both of you back to where Mary was born.
Yeah.
That's a magical quilt.
Mary could never have imagined that her quilt would bring her family together all these years later. Thank you to Liz, Marion, Audrey and Gail for allowing us to be present at their first meeting. Both tonight's objects are reminders of a bygone era, of a life in service, sometimes enjoyed, more often endured by so many. Join us next time on Antiques Roadshow Detectives.